Hi everybody, again, welcome back to Miss Johnson's Read Aloud time. We're going to continue reading from the one and only Ivan. We're going to see what Ivan is up to help Ruby out in this kind of unfortunate time that they're having. This is part 11, so here we go, let's get started. The 7 o'clock show. During the last show of the day, Ruby seems tired. When she stumbles, Mac reaches for the claw stick. I tense, waiting for her to strike back. Ruby doesn't even flinch. She just keeps prodding along, and after a while, Snickers jumps onto her back. 12. I lie in my cage with Bob on my stomach. We are watching Julia do her homework. She doesn't seem to be enjoying it. I can tell she is sighing more than usual. Again, for the 100th time, or maybe the 1,000th, I wonder what is missing from my painting. For the 100th time, or maybe the 1,000th, I don't have an answer. Dad, Julia says to George as George passes by with a mop, "Can I ask you a question?" "May I?" George corrects. "Ask away." Julia glances down at a piece of paper. "What's the difference between the word spelled P-R-I-N-C-I-P-A-L and the word spelled P-R-I-N-C-I-P-L-E?" "The first one is the head of a school, like Miss Garcia. The second one is a belief that helps you know what's right or wrong." He smiles. "For example, it's against my principles to do my daughter's homework for her." Julia groans. If I'm going to be an artist when I grow up, why do I need to know how to spell?" With a laugh, George heads off. "Poor Julia, I think gorillas get by just fine without learning how to spell. And all those endless letters, those sticks and circles and zigzags filling up the books and magazines, billboards and candy wrappers. Words. Humans love their words." I leap up. Bob goes flying straight into my pool. "A word." "You know how I feel about my wet feet," Bob yells. He scrambles out of the water, shaking one foot in dismay. I look around my window at the billboard. I can still hear Mac's voice in my head. "Come to the Exit 8 Big Top Mall and Video Arcade, home of the one and only Ivan, the mighty silverback." I count to 12 and then I count again just to be sure. H. I lay out 16 pieces of poster board, 4 down, 4 across, a perfect square. "What are you up to?" Bob demands. I'm guessing it doesn't involve sleep. "It has to do with the billboard. It's a signs monastery, particularly since I'm not featured." "Oh, the sign's a monstrosity, particularly since I'm not featured." I grab my bucket of red paint. "You're not on the billboard because you're not in the show," I point out. "Technically, I don't live here," Bob says with a sniff. "I'm a homeless by choice." "I know. I'm just saying. I study the billboard, then I make 2 fat lines like the broom handles. Another fat line connects them. I stand up. What do you think?" So that's what he made. He made the letter H. Wonder what he's spelling. "What is it? Now wait, let me guess. A ladder?" "Not a ladder," I say. "A letter. At least I think it's what they're called. I have to make some more." Bob cuddles up next to Not Tag. "Why?" he asks, yawning. "Because then I'll have a word, a very important word." I dip my fingers into the paint. "What word?" Bob asks. "Home." Bob closes his eyes. "That's not so important," he says, quietly. Nervous. All day long, I knuckle walk circles around my cage. I'm so nervous I can't nap. I can't even eat. Well, not very much anyway. I'm ready to show Julia what I've made. It has to be Julia. She's an artist. Surely she'll truly look at my painting. She won't notice the smudges and tears. She won't be sure if the pieces don't quite fit together. She'll see past all that. Surely Julia will see what I've imagined. I watch Ruby trudge slowly through the 4 o'clock show and wonder, what will happen if I fail? What if I can't make Julia understand? But of course, I know the answer. Nothing will happen. Ruby will remain at the main attraction of the big Exit 8 Big Top Mall and Video Arcade, conveniently located off I-95, with shows at 2, 4, and 7, 365 days a year, after year, after year, after year. Showing Julia. It's time to show my work. The mall is silent, except for us. Thelma the macaw, who is practically a new phrase. Julia is finishing her homework. George is sweeping outside. Mac has gone home for the night. I grab Not Tag and carefully pull the folded papers. So many paintings, page after page, piece after piece, my giant puzzle. I pound on my glass and Julia glances over. Fingers fumbling, I hold up one of my paintings. It's brown and green a corner piece. Julia smiles. I display another picture, and then another, and then another, and then another. Each one a tiny part of the whole. Julia looks confused. But what is it? She asks. She shrugs. It doesn't matter. It's pretty just as it is. Uh-oh, says Thelma. No, I think. No. Doesn't matter. More paintings. George calls out to Julia. He's done for the night. Grab your backpack, he says, and hurry. It's late. Gotta go, Ivan, Julia says. Julia doesn't understand. I have to find the right pieces. I dig through the pile. They're here somewhere. I know they are. I find one, another. I try to hold 4 of them up against the glass. Bob, I say, help. Hurry. Bob grabs paintings with his teeth and drags them to me. One by one, I shove pictures through the window crack. They crumple and tear. There are too many pieces. My puzzle is too big. Careful, Ivan, Julia says. Those might be worth millions someday. You'll never know. She arranges the paintings in a neat stack. I suppose Mac's going to want to sell these at the gift shop. She doesn't understand. I shove more out of the hole and more, all of them one after another. So Ivan's been painting, has he? George says as he puts on his coat. A lot, Julia says with a laugh. A whole lot. You're not taking all those home, are you? I mean, no offense to Ivan, but they're just blobs. Julia thumbs through the towering stack of paintings. They might not be blobs to Ivan. Let's leave those by the office, George suggests. Mac will want to try selling them, although why anyone would pay $40 for a finger painting by a 2-year-old that a 2-year-old could do, I don't know. I like Ivan's work, Julia says. He puts his feelings into them. He puts his hair into them. George says. Julia waves goodbye. Night, Ivan. Night, Bob. I press my nose against the glass and watch her walk away. All my work, all my painting, wasted. I look at Ruby sleeping soundly, and suddenly I know she'll never leave the Big Top Mall. She'll be here, forever, just like Stella. I can't let Ruby be alone. Be another one and only. Chest beating. Often when visitors come to see me, they bait their hands against their punny chest, pretending to be me. They pound away soundless in the wet wings of new butterfly. The chest beating of a mad gorilla is something you never want to hear. Not ever. If you're wearing earplugs. Not even if you're three miles away wearing earplugs. A real chest beating sends a whole jungle raining, as if the sky is broken open, as if men with guns are near. Angry. Thump. My sound, echoes through the mall. George and Julia spin around. Julia drops her backpack. George drops his keys. The piles of pictures go flying. Thump, thump. I bounce off the walls. I screech and bellow. I beat and beat my chest. Bob hides under not tag, his paws over his ears. I'm angry at last. I have someone to protect. Puzzle pieces. After a long while, I grow quiet. I sit. It's hard work, being angry. Julia looks at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. What the heck was that? George demanded. Something's really wrong, Julia says. I've never seen Ivan act this way. He seems to be calming down, thank goodness, George says. Julia shakes her head. He's still upset, Dad. Look at his eyes. My pictures are scattered all over the floor like huge autumn leaves. What a mess, George says, sighing. Wish I hadn't bothered sweeping tonight. Do you think Ivan's okay? Julia asked. Probably just a temper tantrum, George says. He reaches under a chair to retrieve a brown and red picture. Can't blame the guy stuck in the tiny cage all these years. So there's all his paintings. Julia starts to answer and then freezes. She cocks her head. She stares at her feet where my pictures lie in disarray. Dad, she whispers, come see this. I'm sure he's another Rembrandt, George says. Let's pick these up and get going, Jules. I'm exhausted. Dad, she says again. Seriously, look at this. George follows her gaze. I see no blobs. I see blobs. Many blobs along the occasional swirl. Please, can we go home now? That's an H, Dad. Julian kneels down, straightening one picture, then another. It says H, and here. She grabs more pictures. Put this one here, and I don't know. Maybe that one. You have an E. George rubs his eyes. I hold my breath. Julia is running now. She picks up one picture, sets down another. It's like a puzzle, Dad. There's something. It's a word. Many words. A big picture of something. A giant picture. Jules, George says. It's crazy, this is crazy. But he is looking at the floor too, wandering from picture to picture and scratching his head. H, Julia says. E-O. Oh? Julia chews her her lower lip. H-E-O. And then it looks like an I. H-E-O-I. George writes in the air with his finger. I-E-O-H. No, not the letter, an actual I, and that's a foot. Or maybe a tree and a trunk. Dad, I think it's a trunk. Julia runs to my window. Ivan, she whispers, what did you make? I stare back. I cross my arms. This is taking much longer than I thought it would. Humans. Sometimes they make chimps look smart. Finally, George and Julia take the pictures to the ring where there's room to see them all. An hour passes as they try to assemble my puzzle. Ruby is awake now, and she and Bob and I watch. Ivan, Ruby says, it's a picture of me? Yes, I say proudly. Where am I supposed to be? That's a zoo, Ruby. See all the walls and the grass and the people looking at you? Ruby squints. Who are all these other elephants? You haven't met them yet. I say, yet. It's a very nice zoo, Ruby says with an approving nod. Bob nudges me with his cold nose. It is indeed. In the ring, Julia pumps her fist in the air. Yes, she cries. I told you, Dad. There it is. H-O-M-E, home. George gazes at the letters. He spins around to look at me. Maybe it's just a coincidence, Jules. You know, a million in a trillion kind of thing, like that old saying about the chimp and the typewriter. Give him long enough and he'll write a novel. I make the grumbling noise, as if a chimp would write a letter, let alone a book. Then how do you explain the rest of it? Julia demands. The picture of Ruby at the zoo. How do you know it's a zoo? George asks. See the circle on the gate? There's a red giraffe in it. George squints and tilts his head. Are you sure that's a giraffe? I was thinking more along the lines of a deformed cat. It's a logo of the zoo, Dad. It's on all their signs. Explain that. George gives her a helpless smile. I can't begin to. I'm just saying that there has to be a logical explanation. Look how big this is. Julia puts the last piece of Ruby's right ear into place. It's huge. It's definitely large, George agrees. Julia watches me. She claws at her thumbnail. She chews at her thumbnail. I see the question in her eyes. She turns back to the paintings and stares at them, looking, truly looking. A slow smile dawns on Julia's face. Dad, she says, I have an idea. A big idea. Julia races around the edge of my painting, her arms spread wide. Billboard big. Not following you. I think this was meant to be a billboard. That's what Ivan wants. George crosses his arms over his chest. What Ivan wants, he repeats slowly. And you know this because you two have been chatting? Because I'm an artist and he's an artist. Uh-huh, says George. Julia claps her hands together. Come on, Dad, I'm begging you. George shakes his head. I'm not doing that. No billboard, no way. I'll get the ladder, Julia says. You get the glue. I know it's dark, but the billboard's lit. Mac will fire me, Jules. Julia considers. But think of the publicity, Dad. Everybody would know about Ruby. You want me to put up a sign that shows Ruby and a zoo with the word home on the giant letters. George gestures towards my picture. A sign, incidentally, that just happens to have been made by a gorilla? Exactly. And what do you want me to do with Max and you want me to do this without Mac's permission? George asks. Exactly. No, George says, no way. Julia goes to the edge of the ring, careful not to step on any of the paintings. She picks up Mac's claw stick. She walks over and hands it to her father. George runs a finger along the blade. She's a baby, Dad. Don't you want to help her? But how would it help Jules? Even if lots of people see Ivan's sign, it doesn't mean anything's going to change. I'm not exactly sure yet. Julia shakes her head. Maybe people will see the sign and they'll know this isn't where Ruby belongs. Maybe they'll want to help her too. George sighs. He looks at Ruby. She waves her trunk. It's a matter of principle, Dad. Princicipal. L-E, George corrects. Dad, Julia says softly, what if Ruby ends up like Stella? George looks at me, at Ruby, at Julia. He drops the claw stick. The ladder, he says quickly, is in the storage locker. Alright, so that's the end to part 11. We're going to stop there. So finally, Julia figures out what Ivan was trying to tell her all along. Ivan wants Ruby to go to a zoo to be free. So now they're going to hopefully put up the billboard and have people help out to move Ruby. Let me know if you like this chapter. I know I did. I can't wait to see what happens next. We're kind of in the last part of the book, so we're going to see if this makes sense, if they're able to help Ruby out. Thank you so much for watching. See you later. Bye, everybody.